the video right before this one, I talked about how employers are starting to crack down on job seekers who are relying on cheating as a way of getting through their job interviews. And obviously, this is a big problem because employers are starting to force people to go on site in order to prove that they're actually able to pass these job interviews, go through the technical assessments, and they're not relying on little cheating AI interview assistants that are on your screen and telling you what to say word for word. And it's of no surprise that people who are pushing the boundaries a little too far are ruining it for the rest of us. We used to be able to interview in the comfort of our own homes, but now we have to get dressed up and go in and shake hands and sit in front of the person face to face. And this is probably going to become more and more common. And frankly, I found some of the reactions to be disappointing, especially given on this channel, I operate with integrity and I teach people how to reclaim control in their careers and not to operate from the idea that the ends justify the means. Listen, just because they're doing stuff that you don't agree with doesn't mean that you should compromise your own integrity. And in fact, we want to start to operate with more conviction and authority in our career. And relying on cheating to get a job is just completely going against everything that I stand for. So this video is a little bit tough love, and I think some of you need it. And because my core values and my mission at A Life After Layoff are to teach you how to do things the right way and with integrity, there is no room for you to take all of the shortcuts to cheat your way through your career, because that is not acting like the CEO of your career. So while I'm going to get down off my soapbox now, I do want some of you to really seriously think about how you want to position yourself and what legacy you want to leave in your career. Do you want to be somebody that cheats your way through and never truly acquires anything of significance? Or do you want to be somebody that operates with integrity even when the job market isn't? And I know which way I'm choosing to go. And if you're watching this, you're probably going to have some more in-person interviews coming up in your future. So let's give you some tips on how to ace those and give yourself the best chance of getting an offer when you're sitting face-to-face with your interviewer. The first and most fundamental thing that we need to do is we need to mind our preparation. Preparation is absolutely the key. And it is crazy to me how many people walk into an interview not preparing enough or not preparing at all. And I've had more than one instance where I have called a candidate, they forgot that they were even supposed to be on an interview, or you could tell that they didn't know who the company was. I actually had to remind them of the job opportunity, the fact that they actually scheduled an interview, and what the job posting even was about. That's not a good first impression. If I have to call and remind you of the job, or that it's clear that you forgot about it, or you're driving, or whatever the case might be, you're likely not making it beyond the first round interview. You're better off just saying, you know what, is it possible for me to reschedule? And that's still not a great look, but it's at least better than going in and making a terrible first impression. So preparation is key. At the very minimum, you want to be checking out the job posting and making sure that you read through it very thoroughly. Internalize all the bullet points that are on there. Go and do some company research. It doesn't mean that you have to do hours and hours of research for every job, but at least go onto their website. Figure out what division this job that you're interviewing for is supporting. Go and understand as best you can what they do, any major developments, any new product lines, any new initiatives that the company's going through, and just be familiar. It might not hurt to go and check out their social feeds, go onto their LinkedIn, just kind of see what they're talking about, get a flavor for it. What we're not looking for in the interview is for you to regurgitate a bunch of random facts that the recruiters and the people working there don't even know. That's not necessarily going to impress us. What is going to impress us is if you at least come in, you show a high level of engagement for the type of work you should be doing and what that division is likely working on and things that are actually important to them. This is your opportunity to start pulling together all of your thoughts, all of your ideas, all of your experiences that are directly related to the job. Start developing your interview stories, because you don't want to wing it here. And while you're at it, once you get past the preliminary screening with your recruiter and you're moving deeper into the interview process, try to leverage the recruiter themselves for additional prep. Send them a quick note if you're moving on to the next round and just say, hey, can you give me any insight into who I'm talking to, what they might be interested in learning about, and what their philosophy is on this job? Because any good recruiter, and I'm talking especially the corporate recruiter who works for the company, more so than the external headhunter. But if you're working with the internal corporate recruiter, we know the hiring teams very well. We know the job, what they're trying to accomplish with the role, what the hiring manager is trying to assess, and what the whole team is likely looking for. And we want you to get the job. I know it doesn't feel that way all the time, but once we get a candidate who is really engaged and is a good fit for the role starting into the interview process, we get excited for you. We're rooting for you because we want the position filled. We want it filled by somebody that the hiring manager is excited about because it reflects positively on us. I certainly would ask the recruiter before I walked into any interview if they can give me any additional insight. And I think you should do that too. Next, you want to make sure that you fill your skill gaps. And this seems pretty obvious. If you're interviewing for a job and you're not feeling that comfortable with the technology stack or the technical components of the role, you want to spend some time preparing for it in advance. And this is ideally something that you're doing before you even start the interview processes at all, before you even start submitting your first applications. If you know that you're weak on a particular skill or you've been kind of like flubbing your way through it in your career, when you go into the open market, you are going to be exposed for having a lack of skill. Or if, like, say you're a coder and you write kind of sloppy code, you develop some bad habits over the years. It is worth you going and refreshing your skills occasionally, going to some of the common industry websites where you can practice your coding skills just to make sure that you're staying up to a certain base level. Because when you find yourself on the open market, sometimes it's unexpected through a layoff or whatever, that is not the time to start cramming because trust me, you have enough to worry about. And not knowing the base level skill for the job that you're interviewing for is something that you should be solving anyway, because if you do get the job, you want to be very confident in. So my recommendation is pay attention to what's going on in the job market. If you're somebody that's gainfully employed and watching this video, go off and check some job postings occasionally just to see what's going on in the market, see where things are moving, and then just make sure that you're staying up on the latest trends. Make sure that your skills aren't atrophying. That's another danger of using AI too much in your job. Your skills start to atrophy. I think AI kind of makes people dumber in a way, to be perfectly honest with you. Next, you want to mind your body language. When you're sitting in front of the interviewer, they can actually see how you walk into the room, how you shake hands, how you make eye contact, how you sit at the table, how you deliver your answers. Are you slouched? Are you looking away? Are you somebody that shows a level of nervousness? It's all about the confidence that you bring into the interview. And in an in-person interview, that becomes a much stronger dynamic. And I know some people are thinking, and it's a very valid concern, that, gosh, that's not good. I can't make eye contact for whatever reason. And here's the deal. It's something that I would really work hard to try to practice, at least in the context of the job interview. Go into Google Meet or Zoom and practice talking to the camera. I'm talking to a camera right now and it's really awkward because there's nobody sitting behind me. I'm basically talking to myself, but you have to get good at staring at something that is not staring back at you. Same thing goes for handshakes. A handshake can make or break first impressions, both good and bad. Too strong of a handshake and the interviewer is going to be walking away saying, gosh, my hand hurts. And I don't know why that was necessary for him to death grip my hand like that. And on the flip side, if you've got a limp fish and you got really sweaty palms, they're going to be thinking the whole time about how they want to go wash their hands. So make sure that you practice your handshake. Just give a nice, normal handshake. Don't overthink it, but just be confident in your posture. Same thing goes for when you walk in the room. How do you enter the room? How do you sit down? How do you lean into the interviewer? Are you somebody that's kind of slouched? Are you looking off in the distance the whole time? Are you kind of fidgeting? Are you doing the nervous tap? And I'm kind of guilty of this, like the foot tapping real fast. Like it or not, nervousness comes across as a lack of confidence. So you have to start practicing this stuff. And I know this sounds ridiculous, but these things really do matter, especially in in-person interviews when you're trying to convey that you are a top choice. So get in the habit of just practicing some of the basic body language stuff. And another thing, I kind of take this a step further, it's kind of related, is just be really polite. Be polite to the person at the front desk. Be polite to the people who take you on the factory tour. Be polite to the person who is maybe valeting your car or whatever the case might be. Just be polite to the people that you interact with, even and especially people that you might come in contact with who are not part of the formal interview process, because those people are always asked for their feedback. And especially for like a plant tour, for example, we would always ask the factory worker afterward, hey, what did you think of him? How did he treat you? How was he engaged? What was your impressions? And they'll give us their impressions, both good and bad. So if you're treating people poorly or like you're too good for them, that gets back to the hiring teams. And I've seen some very senior leaders lose out on opportunities because they had a poor impression by somebody on a factory floor or the receptionist or the human resources person who scheduled them. Next tip is to master the art of confidence. You should be confident when you walk in the room. You should be confident when you're delivering your answers. And you should be very expressive of your confidence in the way that you carry yourself. Again, the body language piece, but also in the way that you carry your words. Do you have conviction with what you're speaking about? Do you firmly believe that you have good experience and you can teach them something? That's the key. You have to remember something. When you're sitting in the interview, especially an on-site interview, they already believe that you have the ability to do the job. Otherwise, you wouldn't be sitting there to begin with. So your goal is to walk in there like you're about to teach them something. I always kind of envision myself or imagine that I am coming in as a senior consultant who is there to try to fix the problem for them. That's my mentality when I walk into an interview. And I operate from that perspective. They're asking me these questions because they've got this problem they're trying to solve. And if you walk in with that mindset, you can start to frame yourself with a lot more confidence. But obviously, you need to know your stuff. So I would not rely on creating a whole series of notes. In your preparation, it's fine to write down all of your interview answers and all these what if scenarios. But when you're sitting in an in-person interview, you're not going to have the luxury of being able to flip through a bunch of pages and get to the right answer and then deliver an answer in a clear and concise way. You're going to have to come up with a way that helps you recall and then deliver answers in a clear, concise, and tidy way. Whether you have to systemize, come up with some pneumatic memorization process that you can recall these answers quickly. I have my preferred way on how to recall answers quickly and easily, and I teach it in the Ultimate Job Seeker Bootcamp. But the bottom line here is to systemize, and whatever that looks like for you and how you best learn. But just come up with a way that you can recall the answers quickly and with authority. And as far as notes are concerned, I'm perfectly okay with writing down notes on my resume. Now, I'm not going to have my entire resume full of all these handwritten notes, but at least a few major bullet points or a few key things that I want to emphasize or stress that are related to the interview, the job, etc. But what you don't want to do is walk in with a whole bunch of notes or try to memorize your answers. You want to practice your answers instead. Practicing and getting good at being able to recall and then present them in a clear and concise way is a skill that you have to master. If you are overly reliant on notes, that's why I hate those little like AI note things that you sound robotic when you're trying to read off them. And if you're trying to find your notes, like if you're on a virtual interview and you're trying to find the note that you want to read, the interview question you want to read from, and you're trying to flip through a bunch of pages or a Word doc or something that you created that you've got off on the side of your screen, now you've spent all of your time just looking for it rather than spending your time thinking through a thoughtful answer, and you're going to deliver a crap answer at the end of the day. I've just seen it happen time and time again. And it's really obvious to the interviewer. We can tell when you're doing that stuff, when you're overly rehearsed or you have these kind of like, it comes across as being fake. You don't sound authentic, almost like you sound like an actor in some sort of a way. So just be authentic, practice, but don't rehearse. And to that end, take your time. It is perfectly okay for you to think through an interview question and come up with the best answer. You don't have to deliver the answer as soon as the interviewer stops talking. It's perfectly fine to sit there for a few minutes and just think, kind of consider the question, and you can even glance down at your resume if you need to, kind of think through when did you actually do the thing that they're asking. And then if you need to ask a clarifying question or two, feel free to do that. Then start to deliver your answer. We would rather you take time and come up with a thoughtful response than to start letting the words kind of vomit out of your mouth, because inevitably you start to trip over yourself. You start talking, and sometimes it's like you can almost feel yourself behind yourself, if that makes sense, where you're saying the words and you're not even sure what's even coming out of your mouth, but you're like, okay, I've already committed to this, so I'm going to say something. And then after the fact, you're like, oh, that was foot in the mouth. Total embarrassment. What that's a symptom of is lack of preparation, nervousness, and speaking before you're ready. So take your time, collect your thoughts. It's perfectly okay. You don't have to feel this. There's no, like, I kind of envision the Jeopardy theme song going in the back of my mind. Like, get rid of that. There's no Jeopardy theme. Trust me, the interviewer would rather hear a consolidated thought than something that's jumbled and doesn't make any sense. And finally, anticipate some of the objections that you're likely to experience before you walk in the door. If you got a job gap that is abnormally long, figure out your story there. If you were terminated from your last job, make sure that you're prepared to talk about the learning and shift it from being a negative to being a positive experience. If you've got potentially ageism or whatever the case might be ready to speak to what skills you bring to the table that are current and cutting edge. And if you're somebody that doesn't have the right kind of skill, be prepared to talk about the thing that you do have skill in that still is sort of related. If you're not prepared for the objection and you get asked it, you're going to be put on the spot and you're likely going to deliver an answer that's not well aligned and not optimal. And all of these things lead to you ending up in the no pile versus being the person who gets the offer. So those are some of the high level tips that I would give you as far as preparing for that in-person interview. These also work for the virtual interviews that are probably going to come less and less common. But nonetheless, these are some of the best practices that I would bring into the interview. So if you're preparing for your next interview, just make sure that you're maybe put this video on bookmark, but watch it a few times, but just take it seriously. You do not need to rely on cheating and doing all these shady shortcuts. They're just not necessary. The nice thing about interviewing is it is learnable. If you're not good at it, you can learn the skills. There's techniques, there's ways to break it down in a very digestible way. You can learn this and you can learn it relatively quickly. Now, if you're struggling with your interviewing, that's exactly what I specialize in. I've got a website called A Life After Layoff, and it's loaded with tips and tricks all from a recruiting perspective. And I share my deepest and most intimate knowledge in the form of some training. And I talked about the Ultimate Job Seeker Bootcamp a little earlier in this video, but that's the foundational video for job search. It starts at the time you decide to open up your job search through each of those phases. Then once you get into the interview, we break down each interview round in great detail. I give you some of my favorite systemized tips on how to recall interview answers very quickly and easily. And I ultimately get you to the job offer, and then we teach you how to negotiate so you don't leave any money on the table. Alternatively, there is another course called the 48-Hour Interview Crash Course, which just focuses on the interview itself. So if you want something that's just a little bit more focused, consider checking that one out. But interviewing is something that is a core skill you will use for the rest of your life, just like resume writing. And this is something that you should be acquiring, because if you don't learn how to do this, you are likely going to leave tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars on the table in lost opportunity by always looking at the shortcuts and never actually learning the competency. This is like a core foundational career skill that everybody should have regardless of the type of role. So don't neglect it. Anyway, I'll get off my soapbox now. I know this was a little preachy, but I appreciate you paying attention and watching and following along. Hope you learned something, and we'll see you on the next one.